The president shows up in Kenosha, or at least is anticipating doing so over on Tuesday, and Evers tells him to get the fuck back out of the city. The president also offers to send federal troops into Portland, Oregon, and Wheeler tells him to get out until somebody dies up off into his city as well. Biden condemns the violence in Portland, but says that he can't say the name of Antifa by name. And a march on Washington leads to numerous people standing to shoulder, but not socially distancing. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning, folks. Sorry for the late start there. I did not actually get up until 7:30. I don't know how I slept through my 6 o'clock alarm, but I sure did. And I looked over at the clock, and it was 7:27. And I said, oops, well, we're going to have a rough time putting a show together as quickly as we can. And then I saw that Steven went live, and, for a lot of the people will carry the ice cream cone. I'm not going to compete with them for airtime and viewers. So I did the best that I could to try and wait until he was done, but I know it was also approaching 9. You guys got work to do as well, and I'm sure that as soon as he's off the air, he's going to pop over and send some of his viewers over here as well. So maybe we'll see some of the Daily Ignoramus crew over here as well. But before we get started, head on over to freedomscoop.com. Freedomscoop.com is going to be your one-stop shop for all of your news and commentary needs. We have got the Daily Ignoramus and Call Me Ignorant. We carry the Generational Gap, the Breakdown with Birkenhoff. We also carry the R-Rated Conservative and the Freckles and Brit Show. Come on over and check us out. Pick up some of our swag and help us support great creators and help us support and fund a trip to get everybody across the country and as many of us into one room as we can so that we can have some live coverage for you guys all together for the election. We've got a few people that are getting ready to do that. We're going to do some remote spots here. So head on over there and help us support that trip, help us support some broadcast equipment, and help us support our cause to bring you news without the left-wing bias. All right, let's get the live chat up here and let's get going into this news here. So, starting off, looking at the stocks here today, looking at the previous close, which, we're past the open at this point, so some of this has changed at this point. Actually, we'll do a refresh and we'll look at what it's done right now, but for Friday's numbers, it looks like we had a little bit of a tumble across the top and off the bottom here. Going back up to raising quite high. It looks like it was a good day over on Friday overall here. Let's see what we're doing so far in the day since we did start so late. Yeah, normally I'd be rushing, getting ready to go to work at this point, but we had a drop right off in the beginning here as well. So we'll probably talk about what happened there tomorrow and what that means for going on into the rest of the week. But let's have a look at what the investors had to say about this to start with. And we will start once again, as always, with Investors Business Daily from Scott Latonin. Dow Jones futures gain on coronavirus vaccine news. Apple, Tesla up on stock splits, but Neo dives 7%. Dow Jones futures rallied more than 150 points late Sunday before cutting gains early Monday, while S&P 500 futures and NASDAQ 100 futures were also higher on coronavirus vaccine news. Apple and Tesla stock splits go into effect on Monday, sparking advances in each stock. Dow Jones leader Apple rose 1% early Monday, Microsoft fell about 1%, and Walmart dropped 2% on new Chinese restrictions that would delay the sale of TikTok. Early Monday, Cnbc reported that TikTok has chosen a bidder and could announce the deal as soon as Tuesday. Stocks on the move in today's stock market include Neo, Nvidia, and Tesla. Apple and Tesla stock split will go into effect Monday. Both come after huge advances in recent months and are on IBD leaderboard stocks. Stocks in or near buy zones include CrowdStrike and Edwards Lifesciences. The Dow Jones futures gained 0.1% versus fair value, while S&P 500 futures were up 0.15%. NASDAQ 100 futures rose 0.25% versus fair value ahead of the stock market open. And that didn't go far. On Sunday, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Stephen Hahn said in an interview with Financial Times that the FDA would be willing to bypass the normal approval processes to authorize a coronavirus vaccine before phase 3 trials are completed, provided the benefits outweighed the risk. Amid the coronavirus stock market rally, the tech-heavy Nasdaq is up 30.3% for the year through Friday's close. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 is up 8.6%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average is 0.4% year to date through the August 28th close. So they're going to approve this vaccine without going through all the trials, but they can't go off and do anything else. Of course, it's got to be it's the virus, because it's what we're most afraid of right now. So they can go through and bypass that, but everything else that you try to do medically, especially if it's something that tries to cure or treat something that is better than what anything else that we could try and cure and treat right now, has to go through years upon years of red tape. Keep that in mind as we go along here. All right, next one here is going to be from CNBC. Continue without supporting. Yes. Stock futures rise slightly as Wall Street wraps up its best August in more than 30 years, from Fred Imbert. U.S. stock futures rose Monday morning as the S&P 500 wraps up its best August performance since the 80s. Dow Jones Industrial Average futures were up 41 points, or 0.1%. S&P 500 futures added 0.2%. Nasdaq 100 futures gained 0.3%. The S&P 500 is up 7.2% month to date, putting the broader market index on track for its biggest August gain since 1984. That's 36 years ago. The Dow has rallied more than 8% this month and is also headed for its best August in 36 years. This month's gain have pushed the S&P 500 to record levels, officially confirming the new bull market has started. The Dow, meanwhile, erased its 2020 losses on Friday, closing the session with a year-to-date gain of 0.4%. We're back in it. At that point, we were back in positive territory, folks. Two big stock splits take effect Monday. Apple shares gained 1% in pre-market trading. As 4-for-1 split took effect, Tesla shares added nearly 3%, following its 5-for-1 split. The August rally built on the market's sharp rebound off the March 23rd intraday low. Since then, the Dow and the S&P 500 are up 57% and 60.1% respectively. We had hoped that the market would consolidate its gains since March 23rd, giving earnings a chance to rebound, said Ed Yardeni, president and chief investment strategist at Yardeni Research, in a note. However, Fed officials continued to drive up stock prices by committing to keeping the interest rates close to zero for a very long time. Consequently, they're fueling the melt-up in stock prices. Earlier this year, the Federal Reserve cut rates to zero and launched an open-ended asset purchasing program to support the economy through the coronavirus pandemic. Last week, the central bank laid out an inflation policy framework that would keep rates lower for longer. So they are playing with the currency right now, and without any gold to back it up here, because we are in a straight fiat system at this point. This is something that we are going to have to sit back and watch and make sure that this doesn't affect us in a negative way, and make sure that the cost of goods stays down to where we want it to be or goes up in relation with our wages. But my fear right now with them pumping the money into it is that the cost of goods is going to go up and our wages are going to stay the same. But that's something we're going to have to watch, and we watch this every morning here, so we will be keeping a close eye on this as we go forward. And we will see, like I said earlier, it looks like we're going to go down. And I'm going to add one more segment before we get into the news here, because with the ad blocker, my computer can handle having RCP on. And that is the fact that we're going to have a look every day at what the new numbers are as we go along and how they've moved. Now, I don't expect them to move a lot because they're not going to conduct polls every day. But just to look at what's happening here, we've got the RCP numbers up here, the national average. Biden has moved down to 6.9 points on a lead, and that does include states like California and New York that have massive populations, and Biden's going to take walking away. But we're going to keep going through some of these maps as we go along and see what we do. We're just going to look at the beginning right now and front page and see we've got the top battlegrounds. Biden is up 2.7%. That's margin of error territory right there. This is getting harder and harder on Biden as they keep going on. And it's already hard enough on the poor man that can't string a sentence together and is still getting paraded out like a minstrel everywhere he goes. Latest betting odds right now, are 50.7% to 48.3%, with probably a 1% margin of error in there as well. So, yeah, we're seeing some motion come along in here. We're seeing some things change, and we're seeing things off of here. So, that's what we're going to see up out of here. We've got actually Trump coming up in a couple of the battlegrounds. Texas, he's up 3.5%, which you knew that was going to happen. I don't think Texas is as much of a battleground as they say it is at this point. Trump is up 1.7 in Iowa and up 1.1 in Georgia. And then we're seeing, oh, they just switched there. We've also got a up 0.3% in North Carolina. But we're seeing these tiny numbers in other places. 2.2 in Arizona, which I don't buy for a second. 2.6 in Michigan. So yeah, that's what we're starting to see in some of these battleground states. So we'll be coming up. It's 64 days to the election, folks. 64 days. All right, let's keep going here. From ABC 7 is where we're going to start off with, which I believe is a local affiliate for me. WJLA, ABC 7, fanning the flames, President Trump to visit Kenosha, Wisconsin, amid police protests. Democrats on Sunday accused President Trump of trying to inflame racial tensions to benefit his campaign, as he praised supporters who clashed with protesters in Portland, Oregon, where one man died overnight, and announced he will travel to Kenosha, Wisconsin amid anger over the shooting of another black man by police. And also the anger of the people that were coming in from out of town to burn the city down and these businesses that people have owned forever. Trump's tweets came hours after a man identified as a supporter of a right-wing group was shot and killed in Portland, when a large caravan of Trump supporters and Black Lives Matter protesters clashed in the city streets. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. I've got that article up here somewhere. Trump praised the caravan participants as great patriots and blamed the city's Democrat mayor for the death. Ted Wheeler, the wacky radical left do-nothing Democrat mayor of Portland, who has watched great death and destruction of his city during his tenure, thinks his lawless situation should go on forever. Wrong! Portland will never recover with a fool for a mayor. He tried mixing with the agitators and anarchists, and they mocked him. He would like to blame me and the federal government for going in, but he hasn't seen anything yet. We have only been there with a small group to defend our U.S. courthouse, because he couldn't do it. Trump has, throughout the summer, cast American cities as under siege by violence and lawlessness. Fact check true, and this after having walked through my former hometown and seen the destruction. Despite the fact that most of the protests demonstrating against racial justice have been largely peaceful. Bull fucking shit. You narrative spinning assholes. With about 9 weeks until Election Day, some of his advisors see an aggressive law and order message as the best way for the president to turn voters against his Democratic rival, Joe Biden, and regain the support of suburban voters, particularly women, who have abandoned him. But Democrats accuse Trump of rooting for unrest and trying to stoke further violence for political gain instead of ratcheting down tensions. Biden, in a statement, said he unequivocally condemned violence on all sides, while Trump are accusing Trump of recklessly encouraging it. Do you seriously wonder, Mr. President, why this is the first time in decades that America has seen this level of violence? Asked Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler. It's you who have created the hate and the division. The White House pushed back. The only people to blame for the violence and riots in our streets are liberal politicians and their incompetent policies that have failed to get control of these destructive situations, White House spokesman Judd Deere said. Trump prepared to travel this week to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where tensions are still raw, after police shot Jacob Blake, a 29-year-old black man, in the back 7 times, leaving him paralyzed. The shooting has ignited new demonstrations against racial justice and police brutality months after George Floyd's death at the hands of a Minneapolis police officer. They're still carrying that narrative, folks, touched off a wider reckoning on race. So that's what we're seeing up out of this here. Yes, it does appear that he will be coming down here or up here tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go and see that or not, because I've already lost 1 day of work and I'm running out of vacation time here. But let's keep going here from CNN. White House says Trump still planning to visit Kenosha after governor urges him to reconsider. From Paul LeBlanc. President Trump is still planning to visit Kenosha, Wisconsin this week after Democratic Governor Tony Evers wrote him a letter urging that he reconsider as the city continues to grapple with racial unrest following the police shooting of Jacob Blake. The White House has been humbled by the outreach of individuals from Kenosha who welcomed the president's visit and are longing for leadership to support local law enforcement and businesses that have been vandalized, White House Deputy Press Secretary Judd Deere said in a statement on Sunday night. President Trump looks forward to visiting on Tuesday and helping the great city heal and rebuild. The statement came hours after Evers wrote a letter to Trump outlining his concern for what the president's presence will mean for Kenosha and our state. I'm concerned your presence will only hinder our healing. I'm concerned your presence will only delay our work to overcome division and move forward together, Evers wrote to Trump. It is our job as elected officials to lead by example and be calming presence for the people we know are hurting, mourning, and trying to cope with trauma. Now is not the time for divisiveness, he continued. Now is not the time for our elected officials to ignore armed militants and out-of-state instigators who want to contribute to our anguish. Yeah, what about all of the cars, trucks, and buses that had Washington plates and incendiary items inside that we saw over the weekend get busted by State Patrol and taken in for attempting to incite a riot? The White House had announced on Saturday that Trump would travel to Kenosha to meet with law enforcement and to survey some of the damage from recent protests. And Sully Blue over there in the Discord linked me to that. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have even heard about it. And then they go back onto the history of this as well, which we already well know from watching the show off of this. So yes, he will be down here tomorrow. I will probably have more details tomorrow morning and know if I can possibly get off work a little bit early. And as much as I know that we need to sit back and play some video games again, if I can get down there and see some of this speech, I will do so. If at all possible, I'll get down there and we'll go watch the speech and see some of the stuff that's going on in there, see if there are any protests or anything else that go along with it. Maybe we'll see somebody else get shot in the nuts with a pepper ball again. We don't know. But let's keep going here. From Fox News, Portland mayor sends open letter to Trump. No thanks. From Marissa Schultz, Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler refused President Trump's offer to send federal law enforcement to the city to control downtown protests that have continued for more than 90 days. On behalf of the city of Portland, no thanks, Wheeler wrote in an open letter to Trump Friday. We don't need your politics of division and demagoguery. Portlanders are onto you. We have already seen your reckless disregard for human life and your bumbling response to the COVID pandemic. And we know that you reached the conclusion that images of violence or vandalism are your only ticket to re-election. What the fuck are you talking about? During the Republican National Convention, Trump and his allies highlighted the riots and destruction in cities led by Democrats, including Portland, to drive home his law and order campaign message. Trump bashed Wheeler as incompetent on Twitter and Friday and threatened again to authorize a federal response. Offered to authorize a federal response. Not threatened. He offered. If the incompetent mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, doesn't get control of this city and stop the anarchists, agitators, rioters, and looters causing great danger to innocent people, we will go in and take care of matters the way they should have been taken care of 100 days ago, Trump tweeted. Fact check, it was only 94 days. Wheeler, however, pointed to tens of thousands of Portlanders who have peacefully protested in the weeks since George Floyd's death in Minneapolis, which sparked a nationwide call for racial justice and police reforms. He defended the proud progressive tradition of Portlanders to fight for justice. When you sent the feds to Portland last month, you made the situation far worse, Wheeler wrote. You offered to repeat that disaster in a cynical attempt to stoke fear and distract us from the real work of our city. And here is the problem with both Governor Evers and Mayor Ted Wheeler on both sides of this here. They are both running fucking scared right now. Evers knew that if these riots continued to go on, the way that they did in Portland, the way that they did in Seattle, every time you have another one of these cities besieged and taken over by these assholes who want to threaten that they're going to go out into the suburbs, and in the case of Portland, who have actually gone out into the suburbs, every time you see some of this, Every single time. Trump starts ticking up in polls. Evers knew that he had to get a handle on this one here, or he was going to see all of Kenosha turn to Trump, and I think he was too late on that as well, because as soon as the federal troops came in, everything's been calm for the last couple days here. And now the president's going to come and step into the city, a city that Joe Biden is never going to enter. President Trump is going to come and talk in Kenosha, and Biden can't be bothered to get up out of his basement to come to Wisconsin at all. And now he wants to send federal troops into Portland because nobody will do anything in Portland. Meanwhile, the rioters are attempting to kill the police in Portland. The body count for all of this stuff is up 30 people. The rioters have killed 30 people through this, destroyed countless lives, forced insurance rates to go up, destroyed buildings, destroyed livelihoods, destroyed the ability for many of their constituents to go to the parole office while they still live in town. We saw that in rubble over in Kenosha on my live streams. They've destroyed all of this here. And Wheeler can come out and say peaceful protest. I haven't seen the carnage in Portland, but I kind of want to. Just from everything else that's going on with all of this. And yes, the president coming down, sending troops into Portland, and then coming down and visiting in Kenosha that was ravaged by violence, that was sanctioned by Tony Evers himself. Well, we know that there are police or black men that are killed by police officers, so this is just bad, even though we don't have all the facts. You just wrote a campaign ad for Trump, and I understand fully that's not what you were looking to do. So that's what we're seeing up out of here. They don't want to give Trump the win. Meanwhile, their people continue to suffer. Let's keep going here. I've got one from U.S. News and World Report. One killed as Trump supporters. Protesters clash in Portland. So after this happened here, old Ted Wheeler changed his mind. And there was a reason that I used the article from Friday to read about Wheeler giving the finger back up to Trump and saying, no, keep your troops out of here. Because once the troops come, the cameras come. But from U.S. News and World Report, one killed as Trump supporters, protesters clash in Portland. From the Associated Press, wire service content. One person was, this is from Gillian Flackus, by the way. One person was shot and killed late Saturday in Portland, Oregon, as a large caravan of President Donald Trump supporters and Black Lives Matter protesters clashed in the street, police said. It wasn't clear if the shooting was linked to the fights that broke out as the caravans of about 600 vehicles was confronted by protesters in the city's downtown. Yeah, it was. I'm positive it was here. An Associated Press freelance photographer heard 3 gunshots and then observed police medics working on the body of the victim, who appeared to be a white man. The freelancer said the man was wearing a hat with the insignia of Patriot Prayer, a right-wing group whose members have frequently clashed with protesters in Portland in the past. No, they fucking haven't. Because every news outlet would be out there screaming Patriot Prayer instead of just screaming the Proud Boys if they haven't, or if they had. I'm sorry, but they had. Police did not release any additional details and were at the scene investigating late Saturday. Portland police officers heard the sounds of gunfire from the area of Southeast 3rd Avenue and Southwest Adler Street. They responded and located a victim with a gunshot wound at the chest. Medical responded and determined the victim was deceased, the Portland Police Bureau said in a statement. Portland has been the site of nightly protests for more than 3 months since the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and also other protests since 1960. Many of them ended in vandalism and violence, and hundreds of demonstrators have been arrested by local and federal law enforcement since late May. The caravan arrived downtown just as the protest planned for Saturday was getting underway. Police made several arrests before the shooting and advised residents to avoid the city core. The chaotic scene came 2 days after Trump invoked Portland as a liberal city, overrun with violence, in a speech at the Republican National Convention as part of his Law and Order re-election campaign theme. The caravan marked the 3rd Saturday in a row that Trump supporters have rallied in the city. Trump and other speakers at this week's convention evoked a violent, dystopian future if Democratic presidential hopeful Joe Biden wins in November, and pointed to Portland as a cautionary tale for what would be in store for Americans. The pro-Trump rally's organizer, who coordinated with a similar caravan in Boise, Idaho, earlier in the week, said in a video posted on Twitter Saturday afternoon that attendees should only carry concealed weapons and the route was being kept secret for safety reasons. So, we're getting back off of this. First and foremost, this is one of the first times that you're hearing about any of this, because I get up and read the news every morning. But yes, for 3 Saturdays in a row, Trumpsters have rallied out in Portland to come and try and fix everything else that's going on here. To try and show support for the businesses that remain in Portland. To try and show them that it's safe. And yes, the rioters and the protesters clashed there. But of course, now this fits the gun control narrative. So somebody died. And we'll talk a bit about the victim and the aggressor in this situation. And we'll see what's going on here. But right now, this is yet another campaign ad. People are coming in. When the city won't do it, people like Kyle Rittenhouse and this caravan are going to come in and try and help and stop and quell the rioting. And the president will stand up there and offer to send in federal troops to stop and quell the rioting, to equally protect under the law the businesses and property of people who just want to be there and live their lives. People like the furniture store owner in Kenosha, who is going to get a big butt ton of insurance money, but is barely going to be able to buy insurance again, especially if he rebuilds in the same area. Or he's just going to pick up and move the fuck out of Kenosha and get out to other places. Like the people that own that car dealership on Sheridan Road, who I would never go back into business again. Who once again surely is going to see his insurance rates go up to a point that he can't afford to open a business again. These people need protection, and the people are going to step up. And the federal government is going to step up. Well, the executive branch, not necessarily Congress, but the executive branch is going to step up and offer, but the Constitution won't allow him to do so. But these people are going to come into these cities and attempt to defend the property and the business from out of state at some point. Now, Rittenhouse, he was a community member of Kenosha. He worked there. He was there for work that morning, and he cleaned up graffiti. There are reports that the gun never crossed state lines. So there's a lot of new stuff that came out of this one that I think this kid's going to get exonerated of everything but flight at this point. And I think that's even going to be pled down to flight without intent. So we're going to see a lot of stuff here. He's not even being extradited at this point. So yes, the people are going to come in. They're going to stand in. They're going to stand up for the people, the aligned people, the little guys. You can't be complacent right now, especially if you want to see Trump reelected, especially if you're still not mad at him over the Patriot Act, like I am. But I am moving closer and closer into that maybe category for him at this point, and seeing more and more of this, I think a lot more people are going to go into that a lot faster than I am. Let's keep going here. From CNN, Portland protest shooting death. Here's what we know from Teresa Waldrop. More than a day after a man was shot and killed in downtown Portland Saturday night as President Trump supporters clashed with protesters against police, few details have emerged about what took place. The Portland police haven't released any information about the victim. The person was shot in the chest, police said. The police had no suspect just after the shooting and were asking anyone who witnessed the incident or has first-hand video to contact them. Police Chief Chuck Lovell urged people not to jump to conclusions about what led up to the shooting. What happened in Portland on Saturday? Protesters were taking place, as they have for more than 90 consecutive nights, against racial injustice and police brutality. The protests started with the killing of George Floyd in May and were fueled again by last weekend's shooting of Jacob Blake in Wisconsin. A Trump 2020 cruise rally in Portland started earlier in nearby Clackamas, Oregon, where a large group of Trump supporters and cars gathered, CNN affiliate KOIN reported. Video footage from KOIN showed pickup trucks with American flags, thin blue line flags, and Trump 2020 flags prominently displayed on the vehicles. After a rally, a line of cars, motorcycles, and trucks made its way along the Trump 2020 cruise rally route, which appeared to include the downtown Portland area. According to an image on a Facebook advertisement of the event, Portland police were aware of the rally and tried to keep the caravan out of the downtown area. Police Chief Chuck Lavelle said at a news conference on Sunday, but a group of the vehicles were able to come into the downtown core. The police tweeted Saturday there had been some instances of violence between the demonstrators and the counter-demonstrators. Videos posted by a New York Times reporter showed the fights breaking out between Trump supporters and the protesters. A man riding in the bed of a passing black pickup truck displaying the blue Oregon for Trump flag and an American flag can be seen pointing and firing a paintball gun at the protesters standing at the corner. Riders in the black truck can be seen releasing some form of spray, and as a green pickup truck passes, someone riding in its bed can be seen spraying something toward protesters. Passengers in the green truck duck as the other protesters toss something at them. The man who died was wearing a hat with the insignia of Patriot Prayer, a far-right group. Not far-right. Has clashed with protesters in the past, according to the New York Times reporter Mike Baker. Trump tweeted, "Rest in peace," about the man. What one witness said, Justin Dunlap, who witnessed the shooting and captured some of it on his Facebook live stream, said he didn't hear much lead up to it. "I heard like 3 seconds of yelling and saw a guy spray bear mace," Dunlap told CNN. "The victim sprayed mace and launched it right into the other guy." CNN has not confirmed if the victim is the person who sprayed the mace. "I watched the video 100 times. It's slow-mo and on my TV, and I still don't know where the shots actually came from," Dunlap said. Dunlap said he's been documenting the unrest in Portland since shortly after the George Floyd protests. "I was in the wrong place at the wrong time," he said. "I'm just a citizen journalist. I just want people to know what is going on out there." Before the shooting, Dunlap said that he saw people who were part of the Trump supporters parade launch mace from the back of their vehicles to protesters walking down the streets. Yes, they're forming up. They're forming up. They're attempting to defend the property of people from out of town. They're coming in because nobody in Portland will do anything about it. They'll just sit back and duck and hide. So that's what we're going to see up out of this here. Let's keep going here. From the New York Post, man suspected in deadly Portland shooting calls himself 100% Antifa, from Lee Brown. So they do have a suspect at this point. Like I said, I kind of ordered these up here so we could see a timeline and see what happened here. And we've even got a little bit more timeline to go along here. So let's keep going here. From Lee Brown, an ex-military man who calls himself 100% Antifa and ready for war is being investigated over the death of Aaron J. Danielson, a supporter of the right-wing Patriot Prayer group who was part of a caravan for Trump supporters who flooded the city on Saturday, police sources told the Oregonian. He was previously cited for having a loaded gun at protests, the paper said. He was identified in part of a distinctive tattoo on his neck of a black power fist, as well as a call from his estranged sister, who recognized him in a video and photos of the deadly attack, the paper said. The 36-year-old sister, who the Oregonian agreed not to name, was first alerted after a threatening call that woke her at 8 a.m. Sunday, warning that our whole family was in danger unless we turned him over. "We reached out to police and confirmed that we recognized Michael in the screenshots from the shooting," she told the paper. Okay. We're obviously not that concerned right now about the safety of this, because it would just take a really, really quick public record search to go and dox the sister, and I'm sure somebody did it already at this point. So, she had to know that if she was naming the dude, that she herself was going to be named as well. The father of two, estranged from most of his family, including his parents, after stealing from them, the sister said. "On the one hand, the whole thing that surprises the daylights out of us, because we always thought that he is a lot of bark and not a lot of bite," she said, "but he's also been very impulsive and irrational." She decried the shooting as not the solution to the nation's problems. "Violence begets violence and hatred begets hatred. This is not the solution. My heart goes out to the victim. It always has, even before my brother was involved." Renale, who has a son and daughter, regularly posts about Black Lives Matter and the protests on his social media, which is now swamped with threats and pro-Trump messages in the comments. Okay. Every revolution needs people that are willing to get ready and fight, he wrote in June, comparing it to his time in the army. I am 100% Antifa all the way. I am willing to fight for my brothers and sisters, he said, insisting he would not run from violence. It will be a war, and like all wars, there will be casualties, he wrote, calling the protesters in Antifa, my brothers in arms. Okay. I want to point something out to Raynell here. First and foremost, if you are going to be this kind of stupid, you probably shouldn't get a tattoo in an open area, especially one that can be very, very easily recognized like you did. So yeah, if you go down for this, which it appears that you are possibly going to be, of course, innocent until proven guilty as we go, but if you go down from this is going to be your own fault. But yes, they do have a suspect in place at this point, so they have an idea. They will be going in and checking in on that and figuring that out as well. So that's what we're going to see coming up off of this. And we've got even more news off of this. After Trump calls him a fool, Portland mayor says support us or stay out of the way, from Morgan Windsor and Meredith Deliso over at ABC News. A day after a deadly shooting in downtown Portland, President Trump and Mayor Ted Wheeler were in a war of words after Trump called the mayor a fool. One person was killed Saturday night as protests in Oregon's largest city entered their 4th month. Portland police officers found a person with a gunshot wound to the chest after hearing gunfire in the area of Southwest 3rd Avenue and Southwest Elder Street at 8:46 p.m. local time, according to a press release. From the Portland Police Department, medics responded and pronounced the victim dead at the scene. A homicide investigation is underway. No suspect information is being released at this time, police said. So yes, we know about all of this here. But I want to see if there's something new that Ted Wheeler had said. Alright, so Portland's mayor called for the people on all sides to end the violence, at which point he's got to come back and admit the fact that there has been violence as well. It doesn't matter who you are or what your politics are, we all have to stop the violence, Wheeler said at a Sunday afternoon press briefing. Trump took to Twitter early Sunday to comment on the latest violence at Portland, calling the city's mayor an incompetent and a fool, while retweeting a video that purportedly showed Trump supporters in their cars firing paintballs and pepper spray at the counter-protesters on the street. The president said that the big backlash is going on in Portland cannot be unexpected. The people of Portland won't put up with no safety any longer, he tweeted. Bring in the National Guard. At which point the Patriot Prayer folks and the protesters, I think, would actually stand down. But the reason they're coming into this, once again, this is a dangerous place for Trump supporters at the best of circumstances. A lot of people have said, if you think that this country is safe, then try wearing a MAGA hat in downtown Chicago. And even before the riots, trying to do that in downtown Portland was going to be the same thing. We saw what happened to Sandman down in D.C. We saw what happened to numerous other people being beaten for wearing MAGA hats. So yes, these people are putting themselves up into harm's way to come out and defend the businesses. And somebody gave his life to come out and defend what Ted Wheeler won't defend. So yes, bring in the National Guard. In response, Wheeler called on Trump to do his part to stop the violence. I'm going to do the work that I need to do here in my local community with my local officials and take accountability for what's happening in our streets, and I'd appreciate that either the president support us or stay the hell out of the way, the Democratic mayor said. Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential nominee, issued a statement Sunday condemning the violence in Portland and unequivocally and challenged Trump to do the same. It does not matter if you find the political views of your opponents abhorrent. Any loss of life is a tragedy, the former vice president said. Biden charged that the president is recklessly encouraging violence and that Americans are less safe because of him. Yeah, no, retire. Resign, Mr. President, and then we'll stop all the violence if you just resign. That's terrorism right there. We'll destroy the cities and your supporters unless you resign, and we'll just keep going down the list unless you resign. That is unequivocally terrorism. What does President Trump think will happen if he continues to insist on fanning the flames of hate and division in our society and using the politics of fear to whip up his supporters, Biden said. He may believe tweeting about law and order makes him strong, but his failure to call on his supporters is stop seeking conflict Shows how weak he is. Right. It's not like you had 94 days of riots before his supporters came out in here. Thanks, Biden. So that's what we're seeing from this one here. I've got another one from Fox 12 out of Oregon. Wheeler extends the olive branch as Trump tweets on deadly Portland shooting from Fox 12 staff. Saturday night's deadly shooting took a political turn on Sunday as Portland's mayor Ted Wheeler blamed President Trump for the hate division in the country. Wheeler's comments came at a press conference on Sunday afternoon as the president referenced Wheeler and Portland in a series of tweets. Wheeler at the press conference extended an olive branch and called on the president to help stop the violence. I'd like to hear the president of the United States say he's all in. Let's bring this great country back, Wheeler said. We need to reset. I need to reset. The president needs to reset. President Trump responded on Twitter while the mayor was in the middle of the briefing, saying, in part, Portland will never recover. With a fool for a mayor. He tried mixing with the agitators and anarchists, and they mocked him. He'd like to blame me and the federal government for going in, but he hasn't seen anything yet. Trump's tweet prompted a response from Wheeler in real time. How can you think a comment like that, if you're watching this, is helpful in any way? The acting Secretary of Homeland Security, who visited Portland weeks ago, has echoed the president's calls to increase law enforcement. When we talk about Portland, they continue to refuse federal assistance to bring violent activity to a close. Chad Wolf said, the citizens of Portland want this. We need to bring some normalcy back to Portland. And if local and state won't do it, they need to ask for assistance from the federal government. Governor Kate Brown also took on President Trump in a statement she issued on Sunday afternoon. So yes, they're still coming out and saying, well, no, don't you dare bring the federal government into this, but help us, support us. Step down and the violence will stop. Well, to that I say, fuck you. And once again, take Kenosha for an example. Evers caused the violence, realized it was out of his hands, and I don't care if you don't believe that Evers caused the violence. Evers caused the violence for all this. It got up out of his hands. And now, he brought the National Guard in. He got additional troops from out of state. And now everything's fine. You don't hear about any violence in Kenosha anymore. Now that there are actually people in there that'll come back and defend it and arrest people who are causing the violence. And yes, just as soon as Wheeler says yes, bring them in, you're going to see a lot of this tantrum slow down in a hurry. Alright, I got one from the Daily Wire here. I got 3 in a row from the Daily Wire in a little bit here, but I got one from the Daily Wire right now. Biden fails to condemn Antifa, Black Lives Matter by name, for repeated violence seems to suggest Trump supporters responsible for death of right-wing protesters. This will be an interesting twist. I haven't read this article yet, but I'm kind of interested in how they spun this one up here from Ryan Saavedra. Democrat presidential nominee Joe Biden failed on Sunday to condemn 2 far-left activist groups, Antifa and Black Lives Matter, for repeated violence that has happened over the summer. Biden's failure to condemn the 2 far-left groups by name came as he released a statement on the shooting that happened in Portland last night, and that resulted in a right-wing protester being murdered. Biden avoided making the remarks on camera about the attack and instead released a statement. It began, and this is a short transcript, so I'm actually going to read this one here, which I usually don't on the Daily Wire. The deadly violence we saw overnight in Portland is unacceptable. Shooting in the streets of a great American city is unacceptable. It works better with a razor like Corn Pop had. I condemn this violence unequivocally. I condemn violence of every kind by anyone, whether on the left or the right. I challenge Donald Trump to do the same. Biden later seemed to suggest that Trump and Trump supporters were responsible for the death of the right-wing protester in Portland last night, writing, as a country, we must condemn the incitement of hate and resentment that led to this deadly clash. It's not a peaceful protest. When you go out spoiling for a fight, what does President Trump think will happen when he continues to insist on fanning the flames of hate and division in our society, using the politics of fear to whip us up his supporters? He's recklessly encouraging violence. He may believe tweeting about law and order makes him strong, but his failure to call on his supporters to stop seeking conflict shows just how weak he is. He may think that a war in our streets is good for his re-election chances, but that's not presidential leadership or even basic human compassion. And I want to point out right in the beginning of all of this here that Joe Biden did not write either of these statements. Some low-level staffer wrote the statements, showed the head of the campaign, and brought him over to Biden to sign his name to him. Biden did not list a single example of Trump fanning the flames of hate and division, but there's evidence that his supporters were responsible for the death of the right-wing protester in Portland. Biden failed to condemn the far-left Antifa and Black Lives Matter by name for the repeated violence over the summer in cities across America, and specifically Portland. So that's what we're seeing up off of this. And yeah, no, he's not going to come out and call him out by name because he's working on getting him up out of prison. Biden is supporting all of this. And it sucks to think about, but he is. Alright, I got one here from the USA Today. Archived, of course, and it is an opinion piece as well. This piece expresses the views of its authors separate from those of this publication. This piece expresses the views of its authors as well, separate from the views of the Freedom Scoop Media Group. Portland, Kenosha killings put America in a dangerous place. For once, Trump must be president. From Ellis Coates. And you understand by that last subject right here that this is why the USA Today pushed this out into an opinion piece rather than probably what's going to be a lot of news coming into this. This country is an extremely dangerous frame of mind. President Trump needs to do something about it. Finally, he faces a problem. To use his language that he alone can solve, I pray that he will. Last Tuesday night, we learned that 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse of Antioch, Illinois, had dropped in on people in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Protesting the police shooting of Jacob Blake in the back, Rittenhouse took an assault rifle with him and killed 2 people, wounding a third. According to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Rittenhouse fancied himself a member of a militia aiming to protect life and property. That is not what fucking happened, you idiot. As we attempted to digest the series of events, we learned of yet another fatal shooting, this one in Portland, Oregon. Pro-police Trump supporters deemed it a good idea to organize a caravan to Portland where they confronted protesters originally brought together by the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. As the Oregonian reported, scuffles between pro-Trump demonstrators and counter-protesters soon ensued. Some caravan members reportedly attacked protesters with paintballs and pepper spray at one point, reported the Oregonian. A man identified as a right-wing activist, Alan Swinney, pointed a gun at a crowd, but did not fire. What precisely happened in Portland Saturday night is unclear. What is clear is that a man was shot and killed in the aftermath. Donald Trump took to Twitter to lash out at the Portland's Democratic mayor and praise members of the caravan as great patriots. This follows a Republican convention during which Trump proclaimed, "This election will decide whether we will defend the American way of life or whether we will allow radical movement to completely dismantle and destroy it." After the speech, he told supporters, "These aren't protesters, these are anarchists. They're agitators, they're rioters, they're looters. They're just looking for trouble, and we've got to stop it." I wonder what Jessica Green has to say about the fact that they keep calling them anarchists. Good old anarchy toward. Obviously, there are people under Trump's influence who are happy to grab their assault rifles, jump on their trucks, confront these so-called anarchists, and try to stop it. So we're witnessing a frightening dynamic that could easily become a pattern of Trump supporters surging into cities to confront Black Lives Matter protesters and people potentially ending up dead. Trump has the power, simply by speaking sense to his base, to de-escalate this madness, so please, Mr. President, do your job. Tell your fans, your base, not to go into strange towns looking for trouble. Tell them to leave their beloved weapons at home and to be considerate of people with different views who are also carrying skateboards and knives and bricks, by the way. If you insist on going to Kenosha this week, you should point out to your people that peaceful protest is a constitutional right and is about as American as it gets. Burning down a car dealership is peaceful protest, and you should encourage them to listen respectfully to what protesters are saying instead of calling them traitors and attacking them with paintballs or other weapons. So I thought this article was going in a completely different direction when I added it up to the stack here, but yes, no, this is a bunch of people, well, one writer in particular, but echoing the sentiments of a bunch of people of, well, if your supporters just don't carry weapons into the area, then they won't get killed. And I have to echo the sentiment of one libertarian thought from the Liberty Lock podcast, Clint over on Twitter. If you don't follow him, you should over there. But I've got to echo the sentiment from him from talking about something else entirely, but he brought up a very good point on this. When they try to say that the Trump supporters, if they would just not go into the cities, then they wouldn't get hurt, and if they just wouldn't carry weapons, they wouldn't get hurt. Hey, how short was that skirt when the girl got raped? This is complete fucking double standard off of everything here. Victim blaming. My God. Alright, let's keep going. I got 3 in a row from the Daily Wire here, which I try not to do, but they just all fit right in a row here. So, starting off, CNN's Chris Cillizza says Trump's riots references show desperation. There's a burning building in his tweet. From Eric Quintanar, CNN editor-at-large Chris Cillizza, who writes on a regular analysis column called The Point, wrote on Sunday evening that President Trump's decision to frequently refer to unrest across U.S. as riots rather than protests shows a candidate in political desperation. Trump's efforts to label what is happening in major cities as riots speak at least somewhat to his desperation, politically speaking, at the moment, writes Cillizza. Included in the top of his column, however, is a photo of a building on fire in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which was ravaged the days following the shooting of Jacob Blake last Sunday. And that is, by the way, the furniture store, which I live streamed from last week. That's that furniture store right there. I recognize the shape of the building, the curvature around here, where the door is and where the front windows are. That is on 60th Street in Kenosha. There's a used tire shop over here where my cursor is. Trump's efforts still... no, we read that tweet already. While it's unlikely Cillizza handpicked the photo for the column itself, the bizarre spectacle echoes a similar incident from last week in which CNN television chyron referred to Tuesday night's unrest in Kenosha as fiery but mostly peaceful. All the while, a field reporter was standing in front of a large fire. Yeah, we saw that one up here. Let's listen to that one again, because that was just too funny not to do again.
Christine, Laura, what you're seeing behind me is one of multiple locations that have been burning in Kenosha, Wisconsin over the course of the night. A second night since Jacob Blake was seen shot in the back 7 times by a police officer. And what you are seeing now, these images come in stark contrast to what we saw over the course of the daytime hours in Kenosha and into the early evening, which were largely peaceful demonstrations in the face of law enforcement. It wasn't until night fell that things began to get a little bit more...
Isn't that great? Isn't that spectacular? All right. Despite the Wisconsin governor asking Trump to avoid visiting Kenosha because it may hinder the city's ability to heal, and it may show that the president will come to Wisconsin and Joe Biden won't. The president plans to visit on Tuesday, a week after 2 people were shot and killed in the city, and another person was injured. Of the president's upcoming travel plan, Cillizza writes, the president's planned trip to Kenosha on Tuesday will give him a huge platform to make that case. He will meet with law enforcement and survey damage from recent riots, according to the Pool report announcing the trip. He'll use that grieving city as a backdrop for his campaign of fear. What the fuck? What the fuck? Seriously, predicted former Obama senior political advisor and CNN contributor David Axelrod. In Trump's perverse political calculus, division equals addition. So never mind the fact that a business owner who's been there since the 70s can no longer go to work and sell office furniture. And never mind the fact that a car dealer has to come up with millions of dollars to replace dozens of cars and his business. This is all just for the fear of his campaign. Fuck you, Axelrod. Fuck you. Trump has also offered to send in federal resources to Portland, Oregon, where violent unrest has been happening to various degrees over the last several months. We've read about that already, so we're going to keep going up off of this one here. After I cuss out Axelrod here, I've got another one here from the Daily Wire. After Biden condemns violence in Portland, Crenshaw fires. You're only commenting now because the polling told you to, and that's the other thing that we're seeing up off of this here. Don Lemon said it outright. We actually need to do something about this and quell the violence because this is helping President Trump, from Hank Berrien. I'm getting pissed at this point. Sorry. On Sunday, after a deadly shooting in Portland, Oregon, in which an apparent Trump supporter was shot to death, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden issued the following statement on Twitter. The deadly violence we saw overnight in Portland is unacceptable. Shooting in the streets of a great American city is unacceptable. I condemn violence of every kind by anyone, whether on the left or the right, and I challenge Donald Trump to do the same. Violent protests have plagued the city of Portland for roughly 3 months. Congressman Dan Crenshaw, who lost an eye due to an IED blast while serving in Afghanistan, fired back at Biden. Too little, too late, the left-wing militants have been at war in America's cities for months, and you're only commenting now because the polling told you to. On Saturday, Axios noted in a Marquette Law School poll of registered voters in battleground Wisconsin, support for Black Lives Matter protests dropped 13 points from June to August, just ahead of the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha. On August 26th, the Federalist pointed out CNN anchors Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo spoke out about the violence in Kenosha, Wisconsin Tuesday, providing a stark contrast in CNN's previous coverage and analysis of the sustained riots in cities around the nation. Lemon and Cuomo cited polling as the main reason why rioting should now be acknowledged as something more than peaceful protest. It's showing up in the polling. It's showing up in focus groups. It is the only thing right now that's sticking, Lemon explained. So yes, no, they're coming out here and they're saying, oh, well, this is just, well, the polling is going bad for us, so now we actually have to do something about this. And this is the point where I start getting mad. This is the point where I'm starting to get pissed off at all this politics off of this here. People lost their businesses. And the only reason they want to do something, in spite of just letting it all burn for their constituents, is because the polling is going in favor of Trump. These people should never be allowed to have power again. And an elected official should never be in power for anything. And I said this out on Twitter yesterday, too. Remember a point in time when a politician was a public servant and not a leader. If we stopped referring to our politicians as leaders and started referring to them as public servants, and I mean, fucking Scott Walker was out talking about the leadership of Brian Style, not Ryan Style, who is my representative here. Fuck you, Walker, and fuck you, Style, because Style doesn't do shit. And he won't talk to anybody except for a mainstream news outlet. And he's actually talking to mainstream news outlets now because he's relevant because of all of this happening in his district, because Kenosha is his district as well. His district comes out all the way out to where I live. But no, your politician should not be a leader. Your politician should never be a leader. Your politician works for you, and more people would do better to remember that. When's the last time somebody looked at a politician and said, hey, just remember, you work for me, asshole? It's been too fucking long. So we need to go back and really review how we look at politicians. You know who needs leadership out of the government? Progressives. They need to be told what to do, who to hate, and why to hate that person. The American dream was about the government leaving us the fuck alone. It's time more people remembered that. I got one more here from the Daily Wire. Sorry to go off on that complete rant off of there. I was going to do a rant on Kyle Rittenhouse just off the cuff a little bit later on today, and that was going to be into there. And I'm going to talk a bit about that too, because I do plan on going and doing that maybe later on today as well. We'll see what we do with video editing here, but 6 Democratic Minnesota mayors endorsed Trump. Democrats left us, moved so far left, we don't recognize the party. And that is capital T, capital P. Of course, it's a title, so it's always going to be capital T, capital P, but we're really looking at a point where the Democrat Party is capital T, capital P, the party. Let's see what Ryan Saavedra has to say about this. 6 Democratic mayors in the swing state of Minnesota, there's words you never thought you'd ever hear again. Even after the Reagan landslide in '84, that only Minnesota went for Mondale. The swing state of Minnesota formally endorsed President Trump for a second term on Friday while taking shots at Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden. The letter mainly highlighted economic issues as being the primary driver for the Democratic mayor's endorsement, but it also noted that the party has gone so far to the left that they no longer recognize it and that the party left them. Today, we write to formally endorse President Donald J. Trump and Vice President Mike Pence for 4 more years. The letter said it was signed by Virginia Mayor Larry Cuff, Chisholm Mayor John Champa, Eli Mayor Chuck Novak, Two Harbors Mayor Chris Swanson, Eveleth Mayor Robert I'm sorry, I'm not going to try and pronounce that one because I will butcher that one, and Babbitt Mayor Andra Zubancic. Like many in our region, we have voted Democrat for many decades, the letter said. We have watched our constituents' jobs left not only by the Iron Range, but by our country, by putting tariffs on our products and supporting bad trade deals. Politicians like Joe Biden did nothing to help the working class. We lost thousands of jobs, and generations of young people have left the Iron Range in order to provide for their families with good-paying jobs elsewhere. Today, we don't recognize the Democratic Party. It has been moved so far to the left it can no longer claim to be advocates of the working class. The hard-working Minnesotans that built their lives and supported their families here on the range have been abandoned by the radical Democrats. We don't choose to leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left us. Yeah, and we're seeing more and more of this here. And we saw this by the fact that it was a lifelong Manhattan Democrat that was elected president in the wake of all of the problems that we're seeing up off of this here. President Trump is a Democrat. So your classic Democrats are leaving in droves to support him, to vote for him, and to endorse him. Because the progressives have taken over so hard into the Democrat Party and shown that they're not the party of the working man anymore. The Democrat Party has become the party of power. Now, to see a business magnate become the presidency, or the president rather, in the other party, raises a lot of red flags for me. But he's still done everything that he can to protect small business and big business alike, to protect all the people. He's offered to quell the riots. So the whole thing has shifted, especially in this last election cycle. And people could argue, and I've argued before, that the whole thing shifted under Barack Obama. But yes, we're seeing this turn. We're seeing this change. The Democrats left me. They left my parents. They've left millions of people around this country. And the Pelosiites wonder why people in Minnesota won't vote for him, why Minnesota's become a swing state, why Wisconsin went for Trump, why we could see a massive landslide like this. And once again, even with all the statistics going in that direction, remember, complacency equals a radical left presidency. So if you think it's in the bag, go out and vote like you're 10 points behind. Alright, let's keep going here. From the Federalist, which I do not usually use, but I could not find any confirmation in this, in a green check verified mainstream news. So we're going to read this, because this was brought to my attention over in the Discord. C-SPAN had so many Democrats calling in support for Trump that they had to change their protocol. From Jordan Davidson. C-SPAN changed their open phone line labels after an overwhelming number of Democratic viewers called on Wednesday night proclaiming their support for President Trump in the upcoming election. I'm a longtime Democrat, born and raised. After watching tonight, I have made up my mind I'm definitely going to vote for Trump, said one of the many voters who dialed in. Before the RNC, C-SPAN's open phone lines were labeled as open for Democrats, Republicans, and other viewers to call in and share their opinions on air. After Trump's acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention, however, C-SPAN received an influx of callers who identified as Democrat but said they would be voting for Trump in November. Due to the increasing nature of these calls, the network adjusted the phone lines to encompass those who support Trump, support Biden, and support others. And there are the photos of the change. Democrats, Republicans, others, support Trump, support Biden, and others. Yeah, because there is something completely different going on. And the whole thing with Biden was, I do believe he was put up there to try and pull some of that divide back. To be the good old union guy that he was for 50 years when he was in Congress. But quite obviously looking at the fact that The people behind him were pulling the strings. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that you guys would find that interesting as well. So I figured I'd throw that in there. And like I said, there was nothing green check that verified any of this. So take it with a grain of salt that this isn't a green check verified website. But this is amazing nonetheless. All right, from the Daily Wire, singer Casey Musgraves says it's an act of violence against the LGBT people to vote Trump. Richard Grenell responds. This will be an interesting little catfight going on. From Eric Quintanar. With the presidential election approaching and celebrities continuing to weigh in on the state of our government, and the people of the U.S., by the way, continuing to not give a fuck what celebrities have to say, Grammy-winning singer Casey Musgraves has also decided to lend her voice to the anti-Trump movement. In a tweet on Friday evening, Musgraves shared an image with a rainbow-colored background and a declaration that anyone planning to vote for President Trump in November is actually committing a form of violence against the LGBT community. Because words are violence. If you're an LGBTQ plus person and you're planning on voting for Donald Trump in November, that's an act of violence against them, she said. Former acting director of national intelligence, Richard Grenell, who was also the first openly gay cabinet member of the Trump administration, hammered Musgraves for tokenizing people on the behalf of the left. Twitter should ban this piece of fake news. This isn't remotely correct. Stop making gay rights a partisan issue, Casey. You aren't helping gay people one bit, Grenell responded in his own tweets. We aren't tokens. When Grenell was ambassador to Germany, he spearheaded a global effort to end the criminalization of homosexuality in 70 countries, including a handful of countries where homosexuality is punishable by death. Barbaric public executions are all too common in a country where consensual homosexual relations are criminalized and punishable by flogging and death, Grenell, then the ambassador to Germany, wrote in German newspaper Bild after a 31-year-old gay man was hanged in Iran. Grenell also argued that politicians, the UN, democratic governments, diplomats, and the good people everywhere should speak up and loudly against such policies. So, and yes, this is another celebrity trying to tell you what it is that you should do and trying to tell people that collectivism is still real. Once again, and I understand the collectivist nature of what I'm about to say here, but once again, the generation that grew up singing the I Am Special song has become the most collectivist generation that I have seen for a very, very long time. If you are in this demographic, you must vote this way. If you're in that demographic, you must vote this way. And the only people that appear to have a choice in this collectivist world that the progressives are putting forward are white men. Because if you are literally any other demographic, you have to vote a certain way. And we have to convince the white men to do the same. So I can't figure any of this out here. But thank you, Casey Musgraves, for pointing out to why we will listen to the music, but we don't really give a fuck what you have to say about your politics. All right, just a few more here, and then we will do something that restores my faith in humanity at the end there. You can probably see my cursor over it. You know where I'm going to go with this. The most underreported piece of news of the week is where we're going to go with that. From the New York Post, we're going to spend just a little bit of time on this one here because this is a statement from Derek Chauvin, not necessarily the medical experts or any members of the media. Cop charged in George Floyd's death argues he died by a drug overdose, not a knee on the neck, from Amanda Woods. A defense attorney for fired Minneapolis cop Derek Chauvin is arguing that George Floyd actually died of a drug overdose and not the actions of his client captured on video seen around the world planting his knee on the back of Floyd's neck. Defense attorney Eric J. Nelson filed a motion in Hennepin County, Minnesota District Court Friday, claiming prosecutors have failed to show probable cause for charging Chauvin with second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter, for which the former officer has pleaded not guilty. ABC News reported. Chauvin was filmed with his knee on Floyd's neck for almost 8 minutes during the May 25th arrest as the 46-year-old begged, "I can't breathe." Nelson's motion, which pushes for the judge to drop all the charges against Chauvin, comes about 3 months after the incident that sparked worldwide protests. So we're not going to go too far off of this. We already know what the autopsy said off of all of this. But I wanted to take a second and talk just a bit about this because I'm honestly, and I believe the medical experts. I believe that I've seen the police body cam video. I've seen the tox report. I've seen it all at this point. I've seen all the evidence. I would be very slow to dismiss these charges if I was the Hennepin County prosecutor at this point. Not because I think that the charges would be good. Not that I think that the charges would stick. But if this guy walks, Minneapolis is going to burn. The people that are out there doing this to Minneapolis, to Kenosha, to Portland, to Chicago, to any of these other places, this is terrorism. This is terror. Hang the man that we want you to hang, or we will burn your city down. This is terrorism. Now, yes, Chauvin should be exonerated, or at least drop down to man 2. But God rest the souls of the people of Minneapolis, and hopefully they have their affairs in order so they can get out of there as soon as they can, because yes, as soon as they drop the charges, the city's going to burn. And this, well, like I said, to try and hold this trial out further and further, because the mob has told you that that's the only way that they're not going to burn down the city, that is terrorism. All right. From ABC News, Maryland official fired for posting memes appearing to support teen arrested in fatal shootings of Jacob Blake protests, from Bill Hutchinson. The deputy director of Maryland Governor Larry Hogan's community initiative, which includes the Commission on African American History and Culture, has been fired for allegedly posting divisive memes that appear to support the white 17-year-old suspect charged as an adult in the fatal shootings of the two men at a protest for Jacob Blake, officials said. Blake is a black man who was shot in the back and paralyzed by a Wisconsin police officer. That had no business in this article, but of course, ABC News had to put that in there so you knew what to be outraged about. Arthur Mac Love IV was terminated from the position he's held since 2015 after he allegedly posted the memes on a Facebook group called Inside Maryland Politics in response to the shooting of the two protesters, sparking condemnation from local leaders, officials said. These divisive images and statements are inconsistent with the mission and core values of the Office of Community Initiatives. Earlier today, I relieved this employee of his duties, Steve McAdams, executive director. The governor's community initiative said in a statement released following Love's firing on Saturday. Cherise Churchill, spokeswoman for Hogan, called Love's online post obviously totally inappropriate. We fully support the immediate actions taken by Director McAdams to address this matter, Churchill said in a statement. The swift action taken against Love came after he allegedly reposted a photo of Kyle Rittenhouse, the teen charged for allegedly shooting 3 people, 2 of them fatally, at a protest in Kenosha, cleaning graffiti from a vandalized wall. The original post caption read, "I'm grateful that conservatives are rallying behind this kid. He genuinely seems like a good person." Love also allegedly posted multiple memes about the shooting, and one of them was a screenshot of a smiling police officer giving 2 thumbs up at the scene of the crime. "Don't be a thug if you can't take a slug," the caption read. So yes, your freedom of speech is gone, and we've known that for a while. We've known that there's been no freedom of speech for a while. That's what social media has done. That's given everybody who wants to put you out of work a great medium in order to go and dig up your actual opinions, turn them over to your company, call you a racist, and have you fired. So there is no free expression anymore at this point. Social media has taken care of that for you. There is no free and peaceful form of speech, because they will take everything that you've done and they will point it out to your employers and they will say, "Fire this man immediately or we will boycott your business." Now, you can't really boycott political office, but once again, there's standards, of course, that need to be set up. So that's what we're seeing up off of this here. I've got one from the Washington Post archive because You can't read them without having a subscription. New Trump pandemic advisor pushes controversial herd immunity strategy, worrying public health officials. From Yasmin Abu Taleb and Josh Dawsey. One of President Trump's top medical advisors is urging the White House to embrace a controversial herd immunity strategy to combat the pandemic, which would entail allowing the coronavirus to spread through most of the population to quickly build resistance to the virus, while taking steps to protect those in nursing homes and other vulnerable positions, according to 5 people familiar with the discussions. The administration has already begun to implement some policies along these lines, according to current and former officials as well as experts, particularly with regard to testing. The approach's chief proponent is Scott Atlas, a neuroradiologist from Stanford's conservative Hoover Institution, who joined the White House earlier this month as a pandemic advisor. He advised that the United States adopt the model Sweden has used to respond to the virus outbreak, according to these officials, which relies on lifting restrictions so the healthy people can build up immunity to the disease, rather than limiting social and business interactions to prevent the virus from spreading. And that's literally what's going to come down to. Coming up on this election, that's legitimately and literally what we're going to see at the end of this. I'm going to lock down the economy for 3 months if I become president. You're going to have to wear a mask for as long as I tell you to. I'm going to open the economy. It's going to be the best economy. We're going to beat this thing, and everybody's going to be immune to it by the end. I had my hands wrong off of there. I held the right hand for the left-wing guy and the left hand for the right-wing guy. Well, it worked for you, I guess. Sweden's handling of the pandemic has been heavily criticized by public health officials and infectious disease experts as reckless. The country has among the highest infection and death rates around the world. It also hasn't escaped the deep economic problems resulting from the pandemic. But Sweden's approach has gained support among some conservatives who argue that social distancing restrictions are crushing the economy and infringing on people's liberties. And that's what it is right there. So, with the new advisor coming into the pandemic response team, we will see what's happening with this. We'll see what happens out of this. We'll see what the states do, because ultimately, once again, this is a very federalist thing. And the localities and the states are going to know what works best for their populations and what doesn't. So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, now I've got a couple on the march here from the USA Today. This dream is still alive. Thousands rally for racial justice at March on Washington. From Nikel Terry Ellis, Nadia Yancey Bragg, Rachel Aratakis, Joshua Boat, Claire Thornton, Ryan W. Miller, and Grace Hauk. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 authors on one article from the USA Today. I'm glad I don't need 7 authors to come here and rant into a microphone. From Washington, thousands converged on the nation's capital Friday, demanding long-lasting change to end systemic racism, as the country reels from police killings of black people this year that have fueled nationwide protests. Marchers, speakers, and organizers spoke out about reforms to law enforcement, expansions of voting rights, and power of voting in November to bring about the change they sought. Many expressed sorrow and frustrations over the many deaths of black Americans at the hands of police, including George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, as well as the shooting last weekend of Jacob Blake. "I wish George was here to see this right now," Philanese Floyd, the brother of George Floyd, said as he struggled to get the words out from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, except he was supposedly on the precipice of dying from a drug overdose. Speakers who addressed the masses included Martin Luther King III, who called on marchers to become the heroes of the history we're making, and Reverend Al Sharpton, the divider-in-chief. The real divider-in-chief. "We come out today, black and white, in all races and religions and sexual orientations, to say this dream is still alive. You might have killed the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream, because truth crushed to earth shall rise again," Sharpton said. "Get your knee off our neck. Enough is enough." Sharpton organized the Get Your Knee Off Our Necks Commitment March on Washington along the National Action Network, marking the 57th anniversary of the historic March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his I Have a Dream speech. Sharpton first announced the march at Floyd's funeral. Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, died on Memorial Day when a white police officer in Minneapolis knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes, and he died of a drug overdose. The march comes as new protests erupted across the country this week after a graphic video surfaced on social media showing a police officer shooting Blake, a black man, in the back several times as he was walking to a car in Kenosha, Wisconsin, while carrying a knife and having one up on the floorboard. Many of those in the crowd Friday donned t-shirts with the faces of the late Representative John Lewis and Floyd on them. The marchers skewed young but in black, but included a diverse range of protesters, all exuding a sense of unity. The crowd swelled despite the heat. Some marchers cooled off in the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial on the 90-degree day. By mid-afternoon, the march toward the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial had begun. It's all the deaths. It's every week, said Virginia Jones Finley, 63, from Suffolk County, Virginia, of why she came out to the march. The people are in there for the long fight, and it's going to be a long fight. It's funny. They're not showing any of the pictures of the crowd there, which was standing shoulder to shoulder. These people aren't social distancing, but they're wearing masks. So we saw that up off the march. I wanted to grab this from one other angle here before we popped on out of here and did a thing that that restores my faith in humanity. So, reading from The Hill and stopping the autoplay. Sharpton police reform takes center stage at National Mall. From Marty Johnson. The Reverend Al Sharpton headlined his news march on Washington this Friday, delivering a fiery speech in which he demanded more legislative action to address police brutality and racial inequality in the country. Enough is enough, Sharpton told a large crowd of the demonstrators gathered at the Lincoln Memorial, the same spot where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his iconic I Have a Dream speech 57 years ago to the day. We didn't just come today to have a show. Demonstrations without legislation would not lead to a change, he said. We come out to let you know if we will come out in these numbers in the heat, and we will stand in the heat, then we will stand in the polls all day long. But we'll also mail in our vote because that's what the government is telling us to be afraid of. They keep telling me about how it's insane that black parents have to have the conversation with our children. How we have to explain if a cop stops you, you don't reach for the glove compartment. Don't talk back. Really? Because I was told that when I was a kid. And I'm not black. We've had the conversation for decades. It's time we have a conversation with America. We need to have a conversation about your racism, your bigotry, and your hate, he said in a speech that was very racist, bigoted, and hateful. Sharpton announced the event on the National Mall earlier this summer when he eulogized George Floyd, a black man who was killed when a Minneapolis police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes, thus causing him to overdose on fentanyl. The civil rights activist and Baptist minister used his speech on Friday overlooking the National Mall to call for Senate Republicans to take up a sweeping police reform bill that passed the House in June, largely along party lines, and completely ignored the fact that Tim Scott put up a bill that was more to the point and wasn't loaded with pork. We have passed in the House of Representatives the George Floyd Policing and Justice Act. Now we need to pass that act in the Senate. We need Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the U.S. Senate to meet on the George Floyd Policing Justice Act, or we're going to meet them at the polls on November 3rd, Sharpton said. The bill, which the Democratic-led House passed on June 25th, proposes a broad efforts to stop racial profiling and police brutality, including by prohibiting police chokeholds. The bill would, Tim Scott's bill also did that. The bill would also create a national registry of police misconduct and would make it easier for police officers to be prosecuted and sued in cases of alleged misconduct and abuse. Republicans have declined to take up the measure and have advocated their own police reform bill, which they also unveiled in June. But it was not good enough for Al Sharpton. "We didn't come to start trouble. We came to stop trouble," Sharpton said Friday. "You act like it's no trouble to shoot us in the back. You act like it's no trouble to put a chokehold on us while we scream, 'I can't breathe.' You act like it's no trouble to hold a man in the ground until you squeeze the life out of him. From fentanyl." So that's what we saw up on the march here. There were some people that were marching across the country from Kenosha down to the DC, and I heard talk that they were walking. I don't think they would have made it in walking distance at the time, but there were talks about that. But it looked like there was a big pilgrimage out of Kenosha to go and see this. So that's what we saw up off of the mall. And the last one that we have here, the thing that restores my faith in humanity for the day here, from the New York Post. "Dozens of missing kids found in Georgia, including 15 sex trafficking victims, the story the mainstream media will not tell you." From Amanda Woods. Dozens of endangered or missing Georgia children, including 15 sex trafficking victims, were rescued during a recent 2-week operation, according to officials. Operation Not Forgotten, conducted in Atlanta and Macon this month, resulted in the rescue of 26 children, the safe location of 13 children, and the arrest of 9 criminal associates, the U.S. Marshals Service said in a Thursday press release. 15 of those children had been sex trafficked for, well, I said sex trafficked. They were trafficked for sex, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported, citing authorities. Officials say they also cleared 26 arrest warrants and filed additional charges for alleged crimes related to sex trafficking, parental kidnapping, registered sex offender violations, drugs and weapon possession, and custodial interference. In addition, the U.S. Marshals Service Missing Child Unit, the agency's Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and the Georgia state and local agencies were involved in the bust, officials said. The children were considered among the most at-risk and challenging recovering cases in the area, due to indications of child sex trafficking and other high-risk factors, including child exploitation, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and medical or mental health conditions, authorities said. "When we track down fugitives, it's a good feeling knowing that we're putting the bad guys behind bars. But that sense of accomplishment is nothing compared to finding a missing child," said Darby Kirby, chief of the Missing Child Unit, said in a statement. So, yes. 39, 3 dozen kids, almost 40 kids, were recovered, returned to their families, harmed of course, unfortunately, but recovered. Won't grow up in this, won't die in this. Almost 40 kids, 26 warrants, for people who are actively and actually victimizing people, violating the non-aggression principle because children can't consent. They don't have the mental capacity to consent, and they will carry this with them for their lives. And these people are not going to fare very well in prison. Once again, innocent till proven guilty, but you're going to have a hard time. And the judges are going to have a hard time. These people are going up. They're going to prison. And kitty diddlers do not fare well in prison. So, that's what we saw off of this here. This really restored my faith in humanity. In spite of everything else that went on along the country, the U.S. Marshals took the time and completed Operation Not Forgotten and saved these kids and put the people that are actually violating the NAP behind bars. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. And this was hurting people and taking people's kids, which is worse than taking people's stuff. So, good on the U.S. Marshals, good on the local Georgia departments, good on the FBI, good on everybody who was involved on this. Absolutely good on this. And that is what restores my faith in humanity right now. So, that's going to be it for the day here. We will be back here later on today with the Red Ned Show. And there will be somebody on the left side of that screen. I don't know who yet, but there will be somebody over on the left side of that screen. So, come on down and check us out. We'll hit the D-Live chest at night here, so looking forward to seeing you guys here tonight. Otherwise, we will be back here tomorrow for more contemporary. Earlier this time, I'm not going to sleep through my alarm and get up at 7:30 like I did this morning. So we'll see you tomorrow morning for that. Until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.